Has someone ever challenged you to something that they didn't know who are an expert at? If so, how did it turn out for you/them? Mine's kind of dumb, but I think it still counts. At work I'm kind of the Google Sheets expert and I make lots of tools for different departments to use. Enter new guy who needed to collect, aggregate and display a bunch of data. My boss was like, send Wish a calendar invite, so you can tell her what you want, and she'll set it up for you. New guy was having none of that, and insisted he was going to do it himself. Well, a week later, he finally has this shitty sheet that doesn't have half the information we need, and we have to have the numbers for the state by tomorrow. So my boss asks me to fix it, and new guy is like, yeah, okay, that's not really possible. This is as good as it's going to get. 2 hours later, I send them both a fully functional and automated sheet that does everything we need, and we'll be able to use it indefinitely, which means next time, and every time, the stupid state report is due, it will already be done. New guy was like, I would have added that in, if I'd had more time. A buddy mine was at a concert in bad seats, and started complaining about it via Twitter. All of a sudden the band starts reading some tweets, and calls my friend up, to sit on stage for a couple songs. They sit him at the piano, and during the next song, they jokingly go, okay piano solo. The crowd laughs for a second, but then my buddy just starts jamming out, as he plays piano in his band. Talk about dream moment getting to play with your favorite band. I was out skating in my driveway one day practicing a difficult trick, for me, over a 6-inch tall board. I had it on its side trying to land the trick from only 6 inches in height, and I kept screwing it up for a good hour. I was trying to land a 360 heel flip, and I always had trouble with that trick, cause I skate goofy to begin with. My neighbor must have been watching, because he comes out, grabs the board I'm jumping over, and turns it on its side so now it's 2 feet tall. He pulls $100 bill out of his wallet and says, if you can jump over the board and land it, then I'll give this to you. What he didn't know is that I was shitty at the trick I was practicing, but among my skater friends, I was known for my ridiculously height. I'm not very tall, but I could put my knees to my chest in a jump and clear 30 inches regularly. So I took the bet, backed way off, took a running start, cleared the board, stuck the landing, and came to a screeching sideways stop about 6 inches from him. He knew he got played, and just laughed, while he gave me the money. Good thing too, cause I needed a new deck right then pretty badly. While I'd never claim I was an expert, I used to be pretty damn good at pool. My aunt and uncle had a pool table downstairs and my parents for a variety of reasons would go over regularly and spend all day there. There was nothing else for us, me and my brother, to do so we just played pool all day for years. Eventually we got bored and saw that he had a book on trick shots, so we started doing that for fun. Never really mastered them, but they made for really good practice in understanding how to get the ball to do what you want. So anyway, for my buddy's 20th birthday he wanted to go to a pool hall and invited a ton of people. Then he told he it was going to be a tournament, drinks for individual games, and a 50 over 50 type of deal for the winner. He gets half regardless, because it was his birthday, insisted I come, and I caved eventually. Get there, first game, they break, and that was the only shot they got. Rest of mine were pretty similar. At the end I just looked at him, told you not to invite me. Found out after that a bunch of them had never even played pool before. Felt pretty bad, so I took the money and bought everyone drinks with it. Not me but my brother and best friend. We were in Baltimore for a baseball weekend in 2009 and hanging out at a bar across from Camden Yards. They had a Silver Strike bowling video game. At our local bar back in Boston we had one as well. I'm decent at the game, but my brother and buddy were fucking amazing at this game. Bowling 300 games and whatnot. So 2 dudes are playing this game and drinking. We ask them if we can play when they are done. They ask if we want to play them. We said sure. My brother and buddy destroy these guys. Like it wasn't even close. These dudes said it was a fluke and they wanted a rematch, but this time for a round of beers. Again, Annihilation City. but they kept wanting to play to eventually win a game. No lie, after 13 rounds of beers they finally gave up. They were great guys. We saw them the next day at the same bar and they walked up to us with beers in hand already and said rematch. To this day we still hang out with them whenever we go to Baltimore, and to this day they have never won. Edit for details. The guys were buying 2 beers each time they lost a game to the 2 guys they lost to, for my brother and friend. The beers were Natty Bob, which is Baltimore's cheap gross awesome beer. I can't remember the price, but they were under $2 a piece back then. They would buy the beers and they'd just start piling up on the table next to the machine, so we were all just drinking them. I'd say around 25 to 30 beers between the 5 of us in 4 or 5 hours. Tab was probably $60-ish bucks for beers, but we were there all night getting wings and a million apps, so we all just paid the tab anyways. My office announced a laser tag team building event 2 weeks after I played in the laser tag Ultrazone National Championships, which were an actual thing in 1997. Edit, sigh. No, this is not a him reference, which I have to specify every fucking time I talk about it. Not a physical challenge, but I sell building materials for a living. Think Home Depot, but for guys that build skyscrapers and stadiums. There has been many occasions where an old man with zero construction knowledge tries to lecture me on what I do for a living. When working as a teacher I beat a lot of students in Pokemon battles, cause they didn't think of me being like 15 years ahead of them in fighting experience. Noobs. A neighbor on my block in Brooklyn challenged me to a pizza bake-off. I recently catered pizza for my daughter's school and word got around the neighborhood my pizza was pretty darn good. My first thought was, this guy is a Brooklyn native, my pizza will be shite compared to his, but there was something about him bragging that I couldn't resist the challenge. He talked up how pizza was in his blood, how his dad ran the pizza place around the corner years ago. I remained silent and let my skills answer for themselves. I got a buddy to let us use one of Baker's Pride ovens at his restaurant. We even had total strangers try our pizzas. Every last person chose my pizza over his. I never mentioned to him that I've worked in pizza places almost every day for the last 30 years. I never mentioned that when I'm not working at a pizza place I'm making pizzas at home at least once every 2 days. I never mentioned that at 9 years old I knew that I wanted to be a pizza man. Here I'm 45 and getting ready to start my own pizza business. I once went to a museum with my sister and her friend, who I hadn't met before. We got to the Greek art bit and her friend started telling me how she was super into Greek myth, and I thought that was cool, because I was, unbeknownst to her, doing a master's in it at the time, and also keeping a blog of myth retellings, which was pretty popular, and it was a relief to have something in common with this stranger. She then got weirdly haughty and told me she probably knew more myths than I did, so, being polite, I didn't challenge her on it and just asked her to tell me her favorite so that we could have a conversation about it. She proceeded to tell me the myth of Daedalus and the Minotaur. I asked her how she'd heard of that one because it's fairly obscure. She told me she'd read it on a viral blog post on a blog about mythology. It was my blog. I once challenged a girl who was a friend to fuzzball, not knowing she grew up with a table in her house and older brothers. I even, jokingly, put money on the game. Well, I learned a bit about humility that night. The icing on the cake was when she drove me to an ATM to get her the money. For reference, this is clay pigeon shooting, kinda known as trap in the south. Well, I'm from a rural area and not exactly super southern, so when I'd go to other trap fields to practice different conditions there's always be a smartass or two try and place a bet with me. This is definitely an old money sport with some of the guns going upwards of $5,000. I had an old BT-100 that we got in a trade for each shot and some cash on the side. While not cheap, it was still much lower than other people's guns and people would take that as me being a newbie. They'd learn pretty quick though, since the team I was on went to the nationals almost every year from 11 to 18. It was always funny, because some would be good sports, but others would throw an absolute fit. I saw a guy damage a 10,000 Pirazzi because someone else beat him before. Even funnier part is there was a guy from the county next to us who could blow us out of the water, and he always shot with an 870 pump from Walmart. Edit. Glossary. BT 100. Browning Trap Model 100. Famous for its dropout trigger, then can be replaced and repaired very quickly. Lead shot. The actual lead balls that are in shotgun shells. We made them from Wheel Weights Nationals. I started going when it was in Vandalia, Ohio. It changed to Sparta IL later. Imagine about 2 miles of trap ranges in a row. Pirazzi. Famous Italian shotgun. Good but expensive 870 pump. Remington model 870 pump shotgun. The stereotypical pump shotgun. It's good. My landlord tried blaming me for damage to the kitchen cabinets, but didn't know that I'm in construction, and I'm very familiar with home building codes. They placed the cabinets too close to the stove and the glue that held the laminate had melted. Someone at a bar bet me there were only 30 days in a particular month. $20 if I could prove them wrong right then. Pre-cell phone days. I was born on the 31st of that month. Showed them my driver's license. Edit. The person was drunk. And maybe not the brightest. Not really a "you got owned" moment, but in college my buddies and I always got the new fighting game when it came out and would put in a couple hundred hours or so on it, basically dicking around with it in online or practice mode before dropping it. But during that time we'd have fight nights couple times a week where we'd all get together at someone's place and duke it out. Loser switches controllers. It's not like I never won, but I was always just middle of the pack, and after 2 years of this literally no one would consider me to be some fighting game wizard. Quite the opposite if anything. Then, for the first time ever, the group decided to pick up a third fighter instead of a second one. Soul Calibur 3 I think. And unknown to anyone in our play group I'd grinded Soul Calibur I for 10 hours a day, every day, for 3 to 4 years. Against 5 people who were doing the same and were just as good as me. It honestly wasn't even fun. After the first half hour they were playing with 200% health while I was playing with 50%, picking random character select, and I still hadn't passed the controller once. And thus it was tacitly agreed that we would all play second fighters from then on. When I was around 10 there was an old man with Alzheimer's in my neighborhood who would often approach my friends and I. He would ask us questions that we obviously didn't know the answer to, such as, "What's the square root of 2?" which was one of his favorites. One day I decided I'd memorize the square root of 2 to 20 digits. Sure enough he did ask me the question again, and I was totally prepared. He was extremely impressed, and of course he forgot who I was, so would continue to ask over and over again. People say all kinds of random shit, how weather and climate functions. I'm a meteorologist in disguise, work as a data scientist, but has a master's and a PhD in meteorology. When I politely and gently inform them how things actually work, people are usually super interested to know more. But occasionally I got something like, "Oh yeah, and how do you know?" Well, I have published several papers on the matter, would love to discuss it all night. So far, they've all backed down after that. Edit. Most common claim I've heard must be that the same weather as the day before acts as a better forecast than the weather forecasts. So attractively simple claim, yet so inaccurate, for the mid-latitudes where I live. It happened all the time back when Guitar Hero was a big thing. I was that kid who was only a few notes shy of hitting every note in Through the Fire and Flames. People were always shocked at how well I could play, and never lost to anyone in person, only to some people online. I still play Clone Hero, and I've gotten better since then, but now my competition is a lot more fierce, since it's a niche community. In junior high I got challenged at floor hockey by this douche, who was good at literally every sport. He was a massive dick, and would make fun of me. I sucked at most sports, and was not particularly fast, but I played ice hockey growing up, and would spend hours on our local basketball court practicing my stick handling. I dusted his ass. I scored a natural hat trick on him. He shut up after that, and stopped making fun of me. Chess. I'm a chess master. I think when people hear that they're like, "Oh, he's really good at chess," but what it means is that I've played in international tournaments and beaten other masters and some governing body has given me a title. Anyway, I get challenged a lot by friends who think they are pretty good. What they don't realize is that your average pretty good player is getting destroyed by your average tournament player, and your average tournament player is getting destroyed by a master. Just graduated as a teacher and I've been working as a casual relief teacher. I play lacrosse, which is a small sport already, and even smaller here in Australia. I tried out for the last World Cup team and made it to the final cut. I was team teaching with another teacher who worked at the school. Before the period he spoke to me and said, "Hey mate, we are doing lacrosse today. It's a bit of a not sport and hard to teach, so just wait over there and then you can just help with supervision and discipline." Then walked off. Being a court from an agency, didn't really know how to speak to him / speak up. I tried to speak to him and say that I played, but he didn't give me a second, so I just listened and did my thing. Few minutes into the start of the lesson I grabbed a stick and ball and just started to work my around the class, giving them pointers and hints. The way he was teaching was completely incorrect, and I didn't want to say anything, so when the kids broke off into groups, I kinda just taught them correctly. He pulled me over at a drinks break and asked how I knew so much / could perform the skills. I told him how I play lacrosse and my playing history. He asked why I didn't speak up and say anything, and I said I tried to tell him. Anyway, I ended up running the rest of the class and even ended up sitting down with him and going through the correct and easier way to teach the game and skills. This kinda qualifies. Not me, but my brother. He works for a scientific instrument company as a technical expert in gas chromatography. He and his colleagues went to a trade show to show off their new instrument. A couple of German scientists come up, ask a bunch of questions, breaking the conversation intermittently to speak to each other in German. Little do they know, my brother is fluent in German. He lets them talk amongst themselves until one of the Germans says, in German, "I bet this one is just as shit as the last one." To which, my brother replies, in German, how it is not in fact shit, because they've done a tremendous number of improvements. The two Germans, now stunned that they've been caught, politely thank my brother and apologize and walk away. The ultimate, no, fuck you way to have handled that, in my opinion. I was a competitive swimmer for 14 years, including 4 years of NCAA, but I'm on the shorter side, so people don't assume I was any good. Was at a friend's house on a lake one summer, and a macho guy challenged me to race to a buoy in the middle of the lake to prove something, I guess. The lake is deceptively large, about a half mile across, so I warned him that if he isn't a strong swimmer it could be dangerous. He was running out of gas after about 2 minutes, so I offered to let him off the hook, but he insisted he would finish. I went to the buoy and was swimming back when I found him floundering, so I lifeguard swam him back to the house. His ego took a deserved hit that day. Don't get cocky around water, even if you think you're a strong swimmer. Edit. Thanks a ton for the W in the votes, but I want to emphasize here how quickly this kind of thing can turn dangerous. I was a lifeguard at the time, and there was another lifeguard present, but even so this was a dumb idea. Don't do dumb stuff in water. I was visiting Kyoto a couple years ago. I'm an American, and my wife and I walked into a tiny bar which had 5 people in suits laughing and talking in Japanese. We instantly knew that this was not a tourist bar and felt pretty out of place. The bartender spoke the most English, so I asked him what his favorite shochu was, and things got a little more comfortable as we drank, and the whole bar tried to talk to us. Someone mentioned Mario Kart, and I said yeah, so the bartender points to an old Super Famicom in the corner, and apparently I have accepted the challenge. I smiled to myself, and my wife thinks it's funny because I used to have some skill at this game. Bartender selects battle mode, and the guy is fucking phenomenal. I haven't played in a few years, and he buries me in less than a minute. The whole bar is laughing, and I'm a little stunned. We're on to the second of 3 rounds. I destroy him. 3 balloons to 0. Everyone cheers except the bartender. 2 shots were put in front of me, and I throw one down. Round 3. We are down to 1 balloon each, and I swear it's the longest battle round of all time. I'm sweating. Shell, dodge, shell, dodge. I have him in my sights and I fire. I miss. The shell bounces off the wall and I self KO. The crowd goes wild. So that's the story of how a self-proclaimed Mario Kart expert embarrassed himself and his country in a small bar in Kyoto. We drank a lot and made a lot of great friends that night that we'll never see again. Went with a big group of college students to a bar. I was challenged by a cute little girl, and by that I mean she was maybe 95 pounds, 4 feet 11, to a drink contest with a pint of beer. I'm 6 feet 1, 200 pounds, so I just chuckled and agreed to it. It seems like I had just enough time to tilt my head back to start chugging when I hear her empty glass hit the table. Turns out she had the ability to just open her throat and pour the beer down. We dated for about 6 months after that. Seriously. My nephew challenged me to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate once.